I get a little bit better at them each time. I've already, even in recording this game, I'm actually doing better at it than I have in quite some time, and I'm about to crest my high score. In fact, I just did. Hey, look at that. What's up, folks, and welcome to Retro Ramble. We are back in Shmupland today, and I'm happy to say that after I covered the generally quite excellent Toaplan shmup collection that came out a little while ago from Bitwave Games, that they put out another one. Yes, indeed. This is very similar to the last one. You can either buy the games as a 4-pack, which is generally what I recommend, or if you're really only into one, maybe two of them, you can buy them individually as well. These are only on PC because Bitwave only has the license to Toaplan games on PC. The console ones are handled by M2. I know, it's weird. Especially since the company that owns the Toaplan rights is now owned by Embracer, who also owns Bitwave. The games industry is weird. But yeah, we've got another selection of 4 titles here. So we did a deep dive on all the various features of this in the last video. So I would recommend you go and check that out if you're not familiar with the features that this collection offers. I'm not going to go over the whole lot of them again. There have been a couple of additional features that they've added. They have improved the rewind and reset features. They've added a mirror mode, which I'm not 100% sure what that's for, but it's there nonetheless. And the cool thing about this is because these all run on the same tech, any changes they make to this collection get backported to the first collection too. So those new features that I just rhymed off, you get those with the old games as well, which is really, really cool. I honestly, I'm a real fan of what Bitwave is doing here. So I'm just going to take you through each of these games so that you can see what they're like and see if there's something you want. I mean, if I hadn't gotten a press code for these, I would have bought them immediately because, yeah, I mean, it's shmups, it's Toaplan, I'm all about it. Let me know in the comments down below what other games, arcade games in particular, that you'd love to see Bitwave take a crack at. Not necessarily Toaplan, just anything, because they actually do pay attention to that stuff. So let them know what else you'd like to see. I mean, if we're just talking Toaplan, I would love to see the Snow Brothers games on here. Toaplan made more than just shmups, and it would be really cool to see that. But they did have a thing on Discord a while back, on their Discord, where you could put suggestions in, and there was a lot of good stuff in there. And they said they're gonna try to get what they can. So yeah, let them know. So yeah, this collection has 3 vertical shmups and 1 horizontal shmup in it, and they're pretty good games overall. I mean, Toaplan shmups are, you know, usually pretty solid quality. They span sort of different eras, as you'll see as we go through them here. But the core thing I think you'll see a lot with these games is some of them will feel familiar to you. You know, a lot of the older Toaplan games had a very sort of Raiden-esque feel to them, which is definitely like what this one here does, for example. But they also have done their own versions of several other ideas. For example, there's a game in this collection that I'm going to show you that plays like Gradius, which is really cool in terms of like the upgrade mechanics and stuff. And, you know, Toaplan, by some detractors, has gotten some stick for saying, well, they just rip off other people's ideas. And, you know, there's one way you could say that, but at the same time, you could, you know, for a while, everybody said that every FPS game that came after Doom was a Doom clone. And that was very reductive because they did their own things. And more than one person can take a crack at an interesting idea and put their own spin on it, right? So, yeah, so the one thing about each of these games, though, is I'm playing them in no particular order, by the way, but of the 2 that I like the most in the collection, this is one of them. This is definitely one of them here. And the thing about these is that, and this may just be my perception, but these games feel a little bit more, I've been trying to come up with a word for this, but you know how with some arcade games, if you lose a life when you're playing in the game, you might as well treat the game as almost like you have one life, because you're going to restart so underpowered that you basically don't have a chance. Yeah, that's kind of what a lot of these are like. And a lot of arcade games are like this because guess what? They wanted your money. And of course, these being emulated arcade games, you can just credit feed your way through them if you want. But if you're a real hardcore enthusiast who's trying you know, for a 1 credit clear or wants to get ultimate leaderboard position. And there are leaderboards, online leaderboards, that take continuing into account, but others that don't. And those are the quote real ones, I guess you'd say. You really want to, you know, that can be a real tricky thing, because, for example, here, so I died there, and you'll come back with most of your powers removed, and it's a pain because you don't start back at the beginning of the level. You'll either respawn, depending on the game, you'll either respawn in place or go back to a checkpoint. And, well, yeah, if you're starting in the middle of a really large battle with all your powers gimped, it makes things a little tricky. Not untenable, you know, if you've got the skills, you can certainly do that, but it really makes these games feel like if you lose your first life, you're kind of screwed unless you get lucky. And it's kind of unfortunate that it feels like the mix in this leans a little bit more towards that. But, you know, arcade game's gonna arcade, am I right? That's kind of how things go here. So, but that's something to keep in mind. Some of these games as well are a little unbalanced. So Fire Shark here, for example, I actually made a bit of a rookie mistake early on. You may have seen that one of the gun power-ups I picked up was sort of that red laser thing. Yeah, that thing it's not a win button, but it's the closest thing to one. It is far and away the best weapon. It does the most damage. It fires continuously. When it's powered up, it has a really wide arc. It is OP. There's no doubt about that. If you get that power up, you want to hold on to that for dear life, and you will do much better in that case. So there is some unbalance, you know, some balance issues going on there with that. Another little thing that's kind of been frustrating in this that they could patch, and I hope they do, is that if you're playing with a controller like I am, the A button is supposed to be your auto fire. In a couple of these games, it just doesn't work at all. And in a couple of the other ones, it's technically auto fire, but it fires so slow as to be a hindrance more than anything else. So I hope the mic's not picking it up, but you probably heard me mashing on it, and that's really what you have to do here. So that's something to keep in mind. And here's our next one. So this is Hellfire. This is a pretty good one as well. This is the horizontal shmup of this collection. This one is cool, and I'm going to show you why. So you might be looking at this and going, oh, it's, you know, it kind of looks like Zero Wing. Yeah, sort of. I would argue this is a much better game than Zero Wing. You know, Zero Wing is great for the memes, but as a shmup, it's not the best, honestly. But here's the sort of really cool mechanic with this game is that by pressing the B button, in my case, on the controller, you can change your gun pattern between multiple different directions. And in fact, that's required of you because you're occasionally going to fight enemies that are at an angle where you can't fight them straight on. You can't just always fire to the right. You've got to fire, you know, either up and down or on a diagonal. It's a really cool mechanic, actually, and it doesn't look like much right now, but you're going to see here once we get things going how this can be really, really valuable, both for not only keeping yourself alive, but for maximizing your score as well by, you know, as close to 100%ing a level as you can. Now, what you do have to be careful about, and you have to start learning to memorize, is the pattern in which your bullet spread changes. So it's a fixed rotation that you have to cycle through. So if you want to go from front to 4 angles, you got to remember how many times you have to press the button to do that. That's a key component of this game. If you don't do that, you're going to have a problem, to be sure. Now, this game, as you can see, does do the sort of checkpoint start thing that I was complaining about before. I find this one to be the least punishing because usually it will spawn you in a location where you have some enemies to deal with, but not too many, and it will usually start handing you out power-ups reasonably quickly. So you might have to play a little extra careful at first, but if you do that, you're gonna get back up to power reasonably fast. So now that I didn't do that justice there, but you know, that's because I'm recording and talking. That's totally why. It's not that I'm bad at games. Stop judging me. But so you see here, you know, within seconds I died again. Okay, anyway, but within seconds there, I got another power-up that kind of got me back in the fight fairly quickly. So they handle that pretty well. And the continues do not take you back to the start of the level. They take you back to the checkpoint. So if you're willing to sacrifice the score in aid of completion, you can do that and, you know, sort of feed your way through it. But I think this one is less punishing than some of the other games when it comes to checkpoints and power-ups. In particular, because not only does your ship actually start off reasonably nimble, but you get a speed power-up almost immediately as well. So a lot of the other games, when you spawn in pretty slow. And if it decides to throw you into a big firefight, you're going to have a hard time getting around. Forget crowd control, just crowd navigation is going to be pretty difficult, right? So that's something, you know, I think this handles things in a much more fair way. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I've enjoyed this one as well. I actually managed, that high score is actually mine. I did manage to get this up to a halfway decent high score, which is nice. I'm sure that was on like the second or third day it was out. So where am I? I have found as well that there still is a problem sometimes with some of the games either not, there I am, 34th, that's not bad. I have had a problem in a couple of the games with it filing scores to the wrong leaderboard. And it also, and this was a problem the first collection had when it came out. I don't know if they patched it yet or not, but there was a problem where I was earning achievements for playing the game in co-op, even though I wasn't. And I noticed with, I forget which title, but it was filing my score to the 2-player leaderboard. And I'm like, but I didn't play 2-player. So I'm not sure why that bug has resurfaced again, but that's something I hope they can look into and patch. The Bitwave is pretty good about supporting this stuff. Like, I think the guy who's like the studio director is actually the lead programmer on this. They're very responsive, which is cool. Okay, and here's Flying Shark, which is our next one up. So we're back in the verticality here, as you can see. So this is one that's, so Toaplan's games kind of straddle the line time-wise between sort of the 8-bit arcade era and the 16-bit era. So the last game was obviously very much a 16-bit era title. The game that I'll show you after this, Slap Fight, is very much an 8-bit title, and some of them, you know, are kind of in between, which is what I would say we have here with this one. So it sort of mixes up eras a little bit. I actually generally like the Toaplan music in their games. It's not the best FM synth by any means, but it's pretty solid. But their 8-bit games are based on hardware that actually a lot of other games use that has the music chip is very, very shrill. A lot of the music and sound effects tend to be a bit more high-pitched. It's not bad, but I do find that one for longer or repeated play sessions might grate on you a little more. That could just be a me thing too, so don't put much stock in that. And you can always turn it down if you don't care that much. I mean, a lot of the best shmup score chasers in the world play the games without sound at all because they find the sound distracting. So, you know, for a lot of people, I don't think that's going to be a big deal, but it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, all of these games play pretty well. You're going to have your preferences on which you like more or less, because Toaplan, the thing that I always liked about them is that their shmups were never necessarily revolutionary. Like, they never did anything, they never changed the genre completely, right? A lot of their games were variations on a theme, and in some cases, were originally somebody else's theme. As I said, that's not a bad thing, though. And they were able to put out games on a regular cadence. Their catalog was pretty extensive. And you could generally believe that when you saw a game with the Toaplan logo on it, that it was going to be solid. It may not be the best in the world, it would never be the worst. They were always consistent. And there's something to be said for that. And they were consistently decent games, that for the most part. And that's the case with the ones in this collection as well. I don't think any of these games are bad, per se. I do think this one here is the meanest when it comes to the checkpoint restarts, as you probably saw there. You lose it to this boss and you're pretty much boned. Unless you are really, really precise with your shots, in which case you probably didn't die to begin with. Toaplan games are always consistently solid. And that's honestly, that they sound like damning with faint praise, but it's really not. That's actually a compliment, because a lot of even bigger, well-known developers like Capcom and Konami had some pretty big misses. You know, whereas Toaplan was always pretty, you could always count on them being pretty good, and we definitely have that case here. They didn't do anything, you know. Toaplan never made a Nickaruga, you know, or Fever SOS, or one of these shmups that really just didn't just beat, you know, march the beat of its own drum. It made a new drum. They never did anything like that. They never really had the chance to. They, I think, tended to play it creatively a little bit more safe, but their stuff was always really solid and a fun time and worth putting your time and, you know, back in the day, your quarters into, in my opinion. I actually came to the Toaplan game a little bit late, because we didn't have, my local arcade didn't really have a lot of stuff by Toaplan. They tended to focus on the larger companies, for the most part. So we didn't tend to get a lot of this stuff. I came to Toaplan a fair bit later in the 2000s when I had my horrible, crippling collecting hobby that I don't really have to that degree anymore. But I always was, I always liked their stuff, and they were the kind of shmup that I always did want to put some time into. You know, one of these days I'm thinking of doing, if I can find the time, I'm thinking of doing a series either on YouTube or on Twitch where I will pick one particular shmup and focus on getting good enough to one credit clear it. And I haven't decided even remotely which shmup I would choose to do that with, but it could be one of these. Definitely could be. That might be a good start. You know, a game that's not too complicated, not too hard to learn, but still requires a lot of practice and effort to get truly good at. That would be, you know, that could be interesting. And here is our last one. So this is Slap Fight, which is definitely the best named of all these Toaplan games, for sure. And this one's cool in a lot of ways. So this is the one that kind of... so this is the one that has a bit of the shrill audio design because it's more 8-bit. But this is the one that also kind of apes Gradius a little bit. But obviously the first thing you're going to see here is that this is a vertical game. Gradius is not. And it does things pretty different in a cool way. So you see at the bottom there, like the Gradius games, you have power-ups that you pick up from the certain enemies that will drop them. It's those stars. And you can spend those to get yourself upgrades and power-ups for your ship. They stack the more of them that you pick up. And the longer you wait, the harder the game is, because you have to survive longer with less stuff. But you get more powerful when you use them. And this has what's called the wing power-up. It actually shows this in the attract mode, which you can bolt on multiple additional modules to your ship, which is the sort of the equivalent of picking up shot power-ups in other shmups, but it actually bolts onto the size of your ship as well. And you have bombs, you have lasers, you have homing missiles, you have a shield option at the end, and you can, there's multiple layers of the wing that you can upgrade on your ship. And it's really cool because it makes you more powerful, but you have to be careful with it as well because the wings can take damage independently. So if you're not careful about it, you can, hey, look, I upgraded it for the first time. I got an achievement. Sweet. There. So you see, I got hit on the end and I lost the wing segment. So that's good in the sense that it didn't kill me, but it's bad in the sense that my ship has now been downgraded and I have to build all the way back up to the wing power-up in order to get back to where I was. I have to do that multiple times. So it's extra power and it's also extra hit points, but those wing segments die in one hit just like you do. So if you want to stay powerful and you don't want to have to risk going through a long power-up sequence again, you've got to be mindful of that. And in some situations, it's going to become very difficult to keep your ship fully together because obviously it's a lot wider and you can end up dealing with a large amount of enemies on this and fire on the screen at once, and you've got to be careful. Like even just this one boss, look, That one hit me in the center, so I'm kind of hosed there. And this has the checkpoint restarting again. A lot of the time, like Gradius, if you had any unspent power-ups left, it will give you a free speed, which you really need almost immediately, because as you can see, your ship barely moves out the gate. So that's something you have to be cognizant of, but as you can see, all I managed to get was 2 speed power-ups, and now I have to deal with the boss again. So, once again, this deals with the kind of unfair checkpointing, you know? So, it's another thing to be cognizant of. Really, you want to try to one-life these things, if at all possible. But, you know, in some of these games, too, some of the boss enemies will eventually move on if you don't take them out quick enough, which obviously impacts your score, but it's good as well, because if you're not really well powered up, you can just choose to, if you're able to just kind of hold out as long as possible, then you can, you know, you can move on and get yourself back up to power without having to actually fully take out that boss. But that has its own challenges, obviously, as you've got to stay, you know, you've got to stay alive long enough for him to get bored and move on. So, you know, that's a thing as well. But this one I think is really cool. My only gripe with it is, yeah, the gnarly checkpoint starts, and the fact that, and I mean, you can adjust the difficulty too if you want, but the gnarly checkpoint starts, and the fact that your ship by default is so slow as to be borderline useless. You know, skilled players, in my opinion, should be able to focus early on the weapons as opposed to the speed. And you probably could, but in reality, if you don't spend at least your first 2 upgrades on speed, you've made things significantly more difficult for yourself. So that's something to keep in mind there as well, which can be a bit of a bummer, but you know, knowing that going in is the key with these games, knowing what they expect of you. So if you put in the time and you put in the practice, you can get good enough that you're not going to have to worry that much about that stuff, right? It's all about practice. These games rely very heavily on memorization. So if you know, if it's not going well for you, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back at her. You know, it doesn't cost you anything extra to play again, unlike in the arcade. So you can really dig in and get good enough that it's not a big factor anymore, right? And that's the thing. If you did play Toaplan games in the arcade when you were younger and you just want to play that for a little bit of fun, these are not that expensive. So I actually think it'd be good even for that. But if you are a hardcore shmup player and you really want to really put a lot of time into it, especially to get maximum score, these are better than emulation, because, you know, if you're a hardcore arcade enthusiast, you know how to emulate these games for free. But legality aside, these collections are good because they bring enough value to the table that, at a reasonable price, unlike some other things that I may have covered on this channel very recently, where it's worth paying for these because you're not out a ton of money, and you get online leaderboards, you know, you get rewind, you get a quick reset if you want, you get all the different customization options, not just in terms of aesthetics, but difficulty. And, you know, and they're constantly adding features to these collections as well. They're adding more things that are getting backported to all the previous versions, so you know that you're going to be supported. You know, there's a lot of added value there that I think makes this worth it, even for enthusiasts who can just emulate and not have to care, you know? And again, it's nice to see a dev like Toaplan, who enthusiasts have a lot of reverence for, but who didn't really, in the annals of arcade history, is not necessarily thought of in the same reverence as a lot of other developers, like your Capcoms and your Konamis and your SNKs and whatnot. And are they on that level? Well, maybe not necessarily, but I think they are. They were a developer who made, again, a lot of solid stuff. Did they make any massive classics that changed the industry? No, not necessarily. But everything they made was good, and I like to see retro games coming out. Wow, the laser is really good. I like to see retro games coming out in an easy to access form that aren't just the same handful of, you know, big blockbusters that we had back in the day that everybody knows. The 19,000th Pac-Man collection. You know, we have plenty of those. Give us different stuff. And I think that Bitwave and to a certain extent as well, Rodaleka and In Games are really doing good by that. They're trying to put out the stuff that not everybody knows, but that if you give it if you like this genre and you give it a chance, you'll probably be like, you know what, that's pretty darn good. And I think that's important, and I'm really glad they're doing that. So in their current form, like the first series, this has a couple of little minor issues, but Bitwave works on them fairly quick. And yeah, we have a lot of, you know, there's a lot of value adds in this and a lot of features that they bring to the table that I think make them well worth considering. And shmup fans should just go get it, in my opinion. And if you're sort of a fair weather shmup fan, someone who's not 100% sure if the genre is for you or you only want certain types of things, give this a look. You can do a lot worse than this in this day and age, for sure. And just like the first collection, I just keep poking at these once in a while. You know, I play them for a little bit here and there. I don't devote hours to them at a time, but I play some and I go, yeah, you know, this is cool. And I get a little bit better at them each time. I've already, even in recording this game, I'm actually doing better at it than I have in quite some time. And I'm about to crest my high score. In fact, I just did. Hey, look at that. So, you know, they reward practice, and because of that, you get that little bit of dopamine every time. That's like, you know, you felt you got a little bit further, you made a little bit more progress, and there's a satisfaction to be had just in those little senses of advancement sometimes, right? And I like that. I like that a lot, and I think these games do them well, and I'm glad to see Toaplan getting some modern love. So yeah, that is the Toaplan Shoot 'em Up collection. It is the second volume. Just like the first one, you can buy these piecemeal or buy them entirely as a pack. That is definitely your best value. And honestly, I don't think any of these games are bad. I don't think I would say, you know, the only things that are annoying about them, like the checkpoint restarts and that, are things that were very common with this kind of game. So I wouldn't say avoid any of these. I think it's absolutely worth buying the collection. I think even the weakest entries are still worth your time and worth experiencing. And yeah, I wish these collections could come to other platforms. Maybe one of these days Tatsugen can work that out, and they'll be able to put these out on things other than the PC, because these are solid collections. The M2 collections are good too. They're just really, really expensive for what they are. So that's we'll see what happens with that though. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Darn, I thought I could get to 6 figures. That all really helps the channel out a great deal. And like I said, leave a comment down below. Tell me what other games would you like to see Bitwave bring to the PC and possibly other platforms as well, because this team's got some chops, and they said that they're looking for other stuff that they hope to be able to get their hands on. So that would be really cool. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover indie games as well as other retro stuff over there, including things that are better suited to streaming than YouTube. We have a fantastic community there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.